Hockey friends and families around the world, and welcome to another episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined by Christie Casciano Burns and Mike Bonelli. You know, as parents, it can be hard not to dream of our kids' success in all realms of life, perhaps even more so as a kid. Our guest today dominated the ranks of youth, minor, major junior, world junior, minor league, and pro hockey, and his story is one that this audience will enjoy both as a journey through hockey ranks and as an insightful look into the power of mindset and how that plays into our overall journey in life. Please join me in welcoming Jason Podollan to the show today. Jason, welcome to Our Kids Play Hockey.
Thanks for having me, guys. Christy, Mike, Lee, really appreciate you having me on.
It's an honor to have you with us.
It totally is, Jason. And, Jason, typically when I start, I summate a guest journey in the opening. But your story to the NHL is one that I actually want you to tell. Can you take us back to Vernon, British Columbia, and how you discovered the game as a young boy?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. Hopefully we'll keep this a little entertaining for your crew. For me, I think like a lot of kids, being Canadian, at least, it's definitely part of the fabric, so you're around it, even if you don't even know you're around it. And how I really got exposed to it was through the television, to be honest. 5 years old, Vancouver Canucks were going to the finals against the Islanders. They were on an unexpected run. And, we only had two channels at the time, and you turn the TV on and there it was. And so that was our provincial town, right? One team in all the province. So, the town of Vernon and the entire province was getting behind them. And as a 5-year-old kid, I don't necessarily remember like really sitting there, but my dad and mom would say, like, I would sit there for the entire 2 hours, like in front of the TV, 5 years old, and was kind of just entrenched in the game. And, I guess that kind of says something intrinsically, obviously, that I enjoyed
Yeah.
it, from a young age, and so I fell in love with the Canucks, and yeah, from there I just started playing hockey that year too. So that was probably a little bit of connection there. So my parents had put me into hockey. I was learning how to skate and doing all that stuff, and watching these big guys on TV be successful, and so that was where I fell in love with it. That ended up morphing into Pittsburgh Penguins and Mario Lemieux. So he was my guy, and I had the Pittsburgh Penguins logo on the wall of my room, and essentially worship Mario, and then it was just kind of that love affair. I essentially wanted to be an NHL player at 8. That was when it switched from being a policeman, or actually I think I wanted to be a truck driver, to be honest. That was what I had on my thing. I wanted to be a truck driver through the mountains, and then it switched to being a hockey player at 8 years old. So yeah, that was the beginning.
That's pretty awesome. And then obviously from there, your journey did take you through all the ranks, right? I mean, you've played at every major level that anybody can think of. You succeeded. Can you walk us through, for the parents listening again, you got the spark, your path, keeping in mind too, we always tell you guys at home listening, there's no correct path, right? This is just his path to the show.
Yeah. That's a great question. And now I find it even more interesting looking back as a dad of 3 boys who all think they want to play in the NHL too, right? And where they're at in their journeys and what they need or don't need. And then me in my realm, I was an only child with a father that was doing well enough financially that he could do some things with me, and there was no one else to really think about, right? So and he was definitely an A-type and an entrepreneur and involved. So like I did have the dad that maybe rub some people the wrong way. So I was in the middle of those interactions sometimes too throughout my journey. So maybe we might even want to touch on that potentially later. But he was obviously doing everything out of love and support, and my mom as well. And yeah, you're just trying to figure it out. I was quite good early, to be honest. I was the kid that was playing up with the older guys all the time, and doing well there, well enough to be like top point guy or one of the top guys as a younger player. And yeah, so you just you start feeling that success, you start pushing, back in the, that would have been like late 80s. There wasn't really the fanaticism about, the whole thing. Like now it's such a business, but it is.
For the kids listening, by the way, Jason, that's the late 1900s as they refer to it now. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there. Go ahead, buddy. I'm just teasing you.
Yeah. But you're trying to get better, right? You're trying to get better, and that was a thing. And so my first experience with kind of getting into some hot water, let's say, was when the Vernon Minor Hockey asked me to try out for this team that was older. I think it was a first year Adam or a second year Adam. They wanted me to play for the Pee Wee team. try out, nervous, little guy, right? Going out there, do the whole thing, make the team, go up into the booth like with the executives. I'm supposed to sign the card. And I was told I was not allowed to sign the card, that I didn't make the team, that I was too young at this point to do it. And so that was like my dad's first like kind of FU match with people, and like, no, this isn't the way it should be, and everything else like that. So you step into the political realm quite early, it seems like, and especially I find like sometimes for the players that are better, because you're kind of pushing barriers all over the place. And my first kind of, which is an interesting story probably for your listeners, is when I did play Pee Wee as a second year Pee Wee, which that was another fight that I wanted to not play Pee Wee that year. I wanted to play Bantam, but they shifted the hitting age, and there was this big thing with Vernon Minor Hockey that they didn't think younger players should play up at that point. So anyways, we ended up sticking around. Long story short, we ended up winning provincials that year, which I'm so grateful for. Like seriously, one of the coolest things that I did in my entire career. Played 10 years pro, and winning a provincial championship at 13 was fantastic. Like our team is still relatively tight. A lot of us are still buddies. I scored a ton of points that year. Like I think I averaged 3 goals a game that year. I had over 215 points, I think, or 230 in like 40 games, so it was one of those types of seasons for me. And obviously felt really good about myself, a lot of confidence, a lot of swagger. We won this championship. But the cool part of that is, like, from a town of 30,000 people, Vernon at the time, we had 3 players on that team that played in the NHL, if you can believe that. Myself, wow. Matt Higgins was a first rounder, and Brad Larson, who was a captain of World Junior Team too, and actually had the longest tenure of all of us, and who's still coaching with the Flames now. So we had 3 guys off the team. Like, wow. So I mean, that's super rare, of course, but I just love that from the perspective of like the growth mindset and like the goals, and like who's to tell anyone that it's never going to happen. Like there's some crazy stuff that happens from time to time, and that was one of them, that we could have that team, and that we could have some players that would go on and play in the NHL. So that was a pretty fun stop along the way.
Having that success so early on, I mean, most parents would be absolutely thrilled. So were there some concerns, about burning out too quickly? And
I don't know. I mean, it's funny because last night we went for dinner. Like my dad took us out for dinner, and he still revisits some of this stuff, okay. Right? And he brought that up as being like this negative time, right? That it was too easy and I should have been pushed, and right. And I don't know. Like I completely disagree with him. Like the next year was the first big year, for our family, because we wanted to now play midget here locally. They wouldn't let me do that. And so we ended up moving. And that was my first big boy thing that I did. Was there was this team called Sherwood Park. So it's just outside Edmonton. And they were always really quite good. Like Tyson Nash came out of there, and Dubinsky, both Lankow brothers. Anyways, I don't want to bore you with the names, but it was always like this hockey hotbed. And they would come to our tournament every year and just smoke everybody, this Sherwood Park team. And I was like, well, if I'm going to go play Bantam, I'm like, I want to play Bantam with these guys. Like that's where I want to go. So I knew this one guy, and we're still buddies today, Mike Dubinsky. I'd never met him personally at the time. And, back in the old days with the big phone book, and you could look up anybody. And so we looked up the Dubinskys, and 14-year-old Jason Podollan calls Mike Dubinsky. It gets him on the phone, and I'm like, hey, do you think I can come play for your team? And so he goes to his dad, who's like kind of a mover and shaker in Sherwood Park, and he's like, I got Jason Podollan on the phone. He wants to come out and try out for our team. And so Vern Dubinsky, his dad, was like, yeah, tell him he's coming. He can stay with us. He can stay with us at the beginning. So my parents got on the phone with them and worked it out, and we came to Sherwood Park, and I tried out for this team. And it was funny because it was so competitive. Like it was something that I had never really experienced before. And I remember leaving the first practice, and I said to my dad, I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to make this team. Anyways, he like laughed in my face, because like how it looked to him was definitely different than how it felt for me, like that perspective. Anyways, I ended up making the team. I ended up leading the league in points. Like Darcy Tucker was there again. Like, there was like a ton of names that were in that league at the time too. And it was a fantastic year again. Like I think we went undefeated until February. Had just a great team. So it was me, Damon Lankow, who went 5th overall, and Mike Dubinsky were on a line. He went in the 3rd round in the NHL draft. I think we had 6 guys on that team playing the NHL. 14 played major junior. Like it was a wagon, and it was a ton of fun. We had a ton of fun. So that was my next stop. I don't know where you want me to go. The next stop after that was playing BC Junior Hockey League at 15 years old. So I played with Paul Correa that year. I was one of two, I think, in the league. Like now you have to receive exceptional status to even do it. Like it was pretty rare at the time, but it wasn't like there was a rule that I had to break to do that. And I had gotten listed the previous year, so I knew I was going to play with Spokane. I guess like the moral of this story for me, at least, is I kind of did the things that the star was supposed to do, right? Like I think if most people were gonna tell somebody like who in BC or who in Western Canada is going to play in the NHL, like I was the guy at that time. I mean, I'm saying that as humbly and as honestly as possible. I think that's kind of the beauty of my story, is that I never turned out to be an NHLer full time, right? Yet I was this guy that checked all the boxes all the way through, and yeah, I mean, maybe that's where the story kind of gets a little bit interesting. Like, well, why not? Like
exactly. That was my question. Why not?
Yeah, and that is the $1 million question, But it was like that whole ride, and Mike, we talked a little bit before we went live, was like the adversity aspect and when it gets real, and I was essentially along for the ride. I mean, I was a hard worker, I was skilled, I grew early. I mean, I had all these kind of things going for me. I was an early birthday. And got to the WHL at 16, which is not an easy thing to do, and had a fantastic rookie year there. I scored 36 goals as a 16-year-old, and I think that was the second most in the CHL at the time. I think Jeff Friesen had more. I had more than Jeff O'Neill, and whatever. It was like I was on the list of being a top 10 pick the next year at the NHL draft, and that was the first time where like adversity struck, where I was having a really hard time as a 17-year-old, my draft year, after playing for Team Canada, the U17s in Japan, and doing all this stuff to kind of get going and to get on the ice. And Brian Maxwell, my coach at the time, who, geez, like honestly, looking back, he was as old school as you can get. Like he really was. And he was a big, tough, intimidating man. And he wanted to be intimidating. Yet he was a very, very good hockey mind. Like we all respected him. He taught us a ton about the game. I still respect my time with him, but there was just an issue that year with whatever lesson he was trying to teach me. And I do think he was probably trying to teach me something. It wasn't working necessarily, right? Like it wasn't working between him and I. Like I wanted to be on the ice. I wanted to make it work. It was a big year for me. I knew that. And then that was like insert my dad now into this equation, right? Seeing his son do all these things. And now I'm playing behind all these guys, and I'm, kind of weird stuff's happening. And that's the triangle. So if Mike, for that scenario, like that was my time at 17 years old, being a potential top 10 pick, not getting on the ice, like, and weird scenarios, right? Like just for an example, for the parents out there, like the weird stuff that can happen, you think like it's unfair or you don't deserve it. Like to be in Seattle playing the Thunderbirds and losing the game 4-3. I had 2 goals and an assist, and we played them the next night back at home, and I dressed and didn't get a shift. Without even any type of communication from the coach, like about why or why not or whatever, right? And that was back in the day. I mean, that kind of stuff still sort of happens, but like you sit there at 17 and you're like, why? Like what? What happened? What did I do wrong? Why are you not happy? And then you have your dad after the game who wants to pack your bag and get out of there, right? Yeah. And he's putting all this pressure on. So that was a tough one. Like for me, just like, what do you do? Right? What do you do? Like you're doing the best you can in your 17-year-old brain to figure out how to navigate that space. You're trying to figure out how to navigate your parents and your father, exerting pressure on you. You're trying to impress this coach that you really want to impress and you really want to have the respect from. You're listening to the scouts tell you, oh, it's Podollan, he's just a spoiled kid. You know what I mean? Maxie's right. Oh, it's Podollan, I can't believe that he's actually putting up with this crap. When's he going to leave? Right. So they have all these different voices, and it's like you're the one stuck in the middle, and all you want to do is play hockey. So I don't know where you want me to go with that, but like that year
was a lot for a
you're
17-year-old to deal with. So how did you sort through it? How did you settle it? And how did you overcome that?
Yeah, well, and that's the one too, like where my dad, if he was on this call, that would actually be super interesting, to be honest. But
call him up.
Yeah, like he thinks I should have left, and like potentially from a hockey scenario, like maybe he's right. You know what I mean? Like I don't really know, because you never know what that would look like.
Sure.
or demanded a trade. But the weird thing was that happened there, and I still don't know the full story. Tim Speltz, who was the GM at the time, says that he was going to tell me at some point. And I think if I backed him into a corner, he probably would. But Brian Maxwell ended up quitting the team like right before a game, like 5 minutes before we're going out. It's a home game, and he left his perch. And this was like right when things with him and I were getting like really quite heated. And so I don't know, like if Brian Maxwell like wanted me to get traded and Tim Speltz said no, essentially, you know, we're not trading this kid, like whatever. I don't really know what happened, but he ends up leaving. So then that whole thing was gone. They brought in a new coach. Didn't really save the year in any capacity. Like it was better at the end, but it was kind of already a bit floundering. But the idea, to answer your question, Christie, like my dad respected me enough to allow me the space. You know, so even though he was leaning on me super hard and like he was telling me exactly what he felt, he did restrain from walking into the room and removing my bag. I mean, he did restrain from like forcing me into some type of decision. And and for me, it was essentially a stand that, you know what, I got this. Like I got this. And yeah, was it the right hockey decision? Honestly, I don't know. But like looking back at a 17-year-old Jason, I'm super freaking proud of like what I went through, you know, like of of how I handled it, of my intentionality with it, you know, and that I was able to stand in the fire and that I didn't run, you know, like I didn't run because it got hard. And yeah, I mean, I did go 31st overall, which I guess you mean I shouldn't say I guess. That's something to be very, very proud of at 17 years old, to be the 31st person drafted. Yeah. But when you think you're going to be 10 or 5 or 3, you know what I mean? And then you go 31st, like that's like expectation is everything, I say to people and parents, you know what I mean? That turns out to feel like it's a very negative thing. At the end of the scheme of things, you mean, Lee, you know as well as anyone, and I guess everyone on this panel I'm sure does, it does change the trajectory a bit of like where you are. Yeah, I mean, now I turn into be like Florida's 3rd pick in the draft, even though I was 31st overall. You know what I mean? So now you're in a different pecking order. There's different lights on you. There's different opportunity. There's all these things that happen because of that. There's different money from you signing, like, you know, your signing bonus and all this stuff. So it was a very impactful year. And who knows, like I said, if that decision was right. But at the end of the day, I did leave that feeling like whatever happens, like I know that I can probably.
Yeah, Jason, going back to Spokane for a minute and then bringing this to like a youth hockey issue, right? I mean, and you mentioned about the coach and the GM and your dad and you, like most of us, we have no idea what's going on around outside of our bubble, right? We don't know if that coach is having his own stresses and his own issues. We don't know if the GM has their issues. Like, I think when we bring it down to just a regular AAA youth hockey team, we have, you know, everybody's a volunteer. Everybody is they're just getting thrown into this thing. Like nobody's a psychologist or psychiatrist or doctor. Or, people can't read it. Most of us as parents are, like your dad. This is the first kid they have. Like they're just dealing with one kid, and I laugh. Like I don't make the same mistakes. I make different mistakes, but I don't make the same mistakes as I do with my second boy that I did with my first. But it's just one of those things where maybe we could talk a little bit about, especially because now you have your kids in hockey and the youth hockey landscape. And I'm not talking about the pro stuff and the, the BCHL and that, because there's such a, you just hit the nail on the head. I mean, you're sitting here saying, oh, I went 31st overall. I'm like, that's a miracle. Like nobody, it's like the greatest accomplishment in the world that you were even in the ballpark of an NHL player, like the finest, finite athletes in the universe get to say that, right? But I think for the rest of us, it's really about knowing like what you can control. And then to your point, like dad helping you make those choices. And I think, Christie talked about a little earlier, about the snowplow parents and the helicopter parents, the parents that want to do more for our kids. But what can you help us understand about, that point of time that we can relate to in a regular youth hockey world? That listen, you're going to go through adversity. You're going through these pain points. The coach isn't most coaches aren't, and Lee, we talk about this, and that's why Lee does what he does, right? Most coaches aren't professional communicators. Right. They're just like, holy crap, I got to deal with my kid and I got to deal with these other 17 kids. Like, this is hard, right? So I think just, maybe talk a little bit about that landscape of the youth hockey world. And, maybe some strategies around, how you might look at that differently now that you're a dad.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, great point. First, nobody, I don't think anywhere wants to be told what to do, especially you're in a position where you're trying to lead people. So as far as from a parent perspective, like whatever your motivation is, and no matter how passionate you are, like you need to step away almost probably 19 times out of 20. Like whatever that thing is probably not what you think it is. And the best service you can be to your player, and it's things that I say time and time again, and it's how I mentor and coach the players that I work with, is that you arm the player in every situation that you can, that they can navigate it. They have to be the first ones to the party all the time. And it can be age appropriate ways, of course. Like an 8-year-old can manage something as they can manage something. Like you have to allow them the space to manage it.
Totally can
in an age appropriate way. And if it's a 15-year-old, they're going to manage it differently, but they need to feel that they have some type of control. You talk about confidence, like confidence comes from feeling empowered. When you feel like you don't have control over anything, you're not going to have confidence. So what I try to do with my athletes is make them feel like they have a piece to do with the solution. Right. And when you feel like you have solutions, now you feel like you are in control. Now you feel like you have confidence. So all those little things. And I mean, to your point, Mike, I mean, now I am a dad, right? And now I am a dad that actually knows a hell of a lot about the game and can see through a lot of these things that are happening. And it's easy for me to be like critical and want to get in there and blah, blah, blah. But I step back and I talk to Hudson, I talk to Gunnar, I talk to TJ, and I'm like, hey, how much does this bother you? It bothers me this much. So what do you think your options are right now in this scenario? What could you do? And then A, B, C. What are you willing to do? How much? I mean, if it bothers you enough, then you might be willing to do this. And if not, then you better suck it up and you just got to go on and do your thing. Right. So those are discussions we have. I think that there are maybe times where you can come in as a parent, like maybe backdoor in a business conversational, hey, this is how I think that we can help my kid, because he's going through X, Y, Z. Almost like, hey, how do we have a planned approach to help him? I think that's like the only way that I've ever done it before. And usually coaches are very receptive to that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one. Sorry, Lee.
You're good. You're good.
But I mean, that's what my whole point is, right? That you have a 9-year-old. And if a coach says, I don't want to talk to the parent, I'm talking to the 9-year-old, they have to learn how to talk with me. I'm like, the kid is 9 and you don't know how to talk to a 9-year-old either. Like I'm here as I'm my son's agent. Not to get him more ice time, but to look at him and say, okay, is that the answer you want to give? Or and we talked about this, I think, at one of our last podcasts about, coaching. If you're going to throw your kid in there, first of all, you have to be in there, I think. But if you're going to let your son talk, you need to pre-coach them on how you're going to approach that coach, because no adult wants to hear from a 9-year-old, like, and say, this is what it's all about, coach. This is how I expect this to go. I'm like, who the hell are you? That's just human nature. That's how people are, I think. But I say it all the time. Like I vividly remember like my son in something like in an open hockey session or something like that. And some kid kept like stealing the puck from him and like cross-checking him and, doing all kinds of like stuff that wasn't like normal. Like, you're like, what the hell is this kid doing? And at one point I'm like, I'm on the sideline saying, put your stick across this kid's teeth, like right now. Like, why are you allowing him to do this? And I asked him later on, I'm like, what the hell's going on? He goes, what? I don't care. Like, it didn't even bother him. So I think my anxiety and my energy level and what I wanted, right, had nothing to do with what he even thought. Like, it wasn't even going through his mind.
Happens more than you think.
we all inject into this, like, like your dad, right? You go in there, get your bag, let's get the hell out of here. I'm like, well, I don't know. I want to make this work. Like, I'm the one in it. And you're, and I think, and you're in a really high pressured situation. I think often with our 9, 10, 11-year-olds, we don't allow that process to happen.
Right.
We just react.
Well, yeah, I would say too that as coaches, we are a little bit responsible for helping that process to happen. And Jason, I got to tell you, I got a page full of notes here, so I'm gonna have to go back and forth here. But like, look, just stay on this topic again. Let's just stay on the 9, 10-year-old kind of age group. Although I think this can happen in every age group. We work into our coaching plans for the season, not one practice. How are we going to help these kids advocate for themselves? And it's little things like in our pregame warm-ups, the first third of the season, I ran it, right? Fully knowing that the second third of the season, I was going to start selecting kids to run it. And I want them to do it. And I don't jump in too much. It's like, you guys take the responsibility of speaking to each other. And if there's a problem, you stop it, you start it. And they love that responsibility, right? And then on top of it too, if there's disagreements on the team, I always like to tell the kids, you have to advocate for yourself. Is this something you need me to step in, or can you talk to your teammate? Like, these are little things, and parents obviously play a role in this as well, with everything. And I think at the end of the day, the key word for me, what I'm trying to develop in addition to hockey skills, which is a given, is some self-esteem. Because I think that when you look at today's world with the kind of human highlight reel that social media is, the pressures of today, we're not even talking about in the late 80s, early 90s, Jason. It's like self-esteem is something you've got to teach these kids to develop. And then the other part of this, and Jason, we'll throw it back to you in a minute. Mike, you brought this up. And so do you, Jason, like the line for stepping in, right? Like, where's the line for a parent to step in? And the thing is that I believe parents don't understand where you think the line is so far from the actual line, right? For example, I caught a conversation the other day where someone was saying, how do they expect my 10-year-old to get good at right wing when they're moving them around to every position and trying to teach them every position? I'm going to talk to the coach about that. It's like, no, that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing at this age, 8, 9 years old. They should be experiencing multiple positions. But it's like, I'm going to talk to the coach about that. First thing you should do is, maybe have a conversation with your kid, because your kid's probably going to tell you what the coach is saying is, I want you to experience all the positions so you can get better at them. That's not the line for me. The line for me is a kid seriously being wronged emotionally, physically, right, developmentally. Like, if I feel like that's being stunted with any kid, not even just my own, it's time to step in, because that's not why we're here, right? We're here for emotional support, development, right? And to make sure they can advocate for themselves. So parents, everyone's got to make that up on their own. Like I say it all the time, there's no perfect parents, all right? Every one of us is different. Jason, I do want to dive into your dad and you and that relationship, but just on the topic of what we're talking about, the self-esteem and understanding, having kids advocate for themselves. Is that something, again, with Up My Hockey that you do? Is that something that you feel like was lacking when you were a kid?
I think it's still lacking tremendously. I think it's probably even worse than it was, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone is so worried about I think there's way more emphasis on I as us now. Is kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
And with that becomes a lot of like, I've been wronged. I am the victim, right? And that inherently now there's more problems, right? So yeah, I try and shift the culture to not that at all, right? So like, what are we celebrating? Like, if there is this challenge, whatever this challenge is, like, that is now hopefully an opportunity. If we can view those as opportunities and not injustices, right? It's actually a gift in some sort if we want to look at it that way. And I think that's a skill, to be honest, like 100% a skill. So yeah, I can use my son Hudson, right? Like, so, and it might be a perfect example. He was playing first year U15, so contact hockey, playing for a local AA program, like a zone program. And he got hurt early, banged his head. So he had a concussion. And, first year, 115 pounds, there's 180 pounders in his league, trying to figure that whole space out. And when he's on the shelf now, meaning like he's not playing, the team's going to tournaments and they're bonding and everything else. And so he came back into the mix, not really feeling like he was a part of the team, not getting a ton of ice time when he came back either. 7-8 minutes as a 14-year-old. Like, there was tons of feelings inside me that were like, this is not going the way it should be going, I don't think, And yeah, so we had that conversation. Like, how do you get back? How do you feel more connected, Hudson? Should someone come up and talk to you? Should you wait for people to come talk to you, or should you initiate conversations? Right. Would be like one thing. Do you feel like the coach isn't playing you because you're not ready or because you're not good enough? And do you think that's a conversation you want to have with him to see what he's thinking? And anyway, so we would have those conversations, and Hudson would navigate them how he thought. And then on the back side of that, I called the coach and I was like, hey, Hudson's feeling left out. And I'm like, that's the really thing I just don't want. I said, you run your team and you use him how you want, but he's not feeling a part of it right now. And he's feeling isolated. And I think that's not really what you stand. Cause I knew what he stood for, the coach too. Right? He said, oh, thank you for telling me that.
Right.
Was the response. Thank you very much. So now I got two things going on, right? Hudson's trying to help himself. The coach is also trying to like put a little bit more of a spotlight on him to make him feel more included. And then, dust settles and he starts getting more ice time and he has a great second half and he finishes off the year really well. Like that could have went vastly differently.
Right.
Right.
And
so
anyway, sorry, Christie, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great example, Jason, of when it's appropriate for a parent to step in because they're looking out for their kids' mental health as well. Mm-hmm. Not so much for my kids not getting playing time and all that for all the wrong reasons. But I think that's a great example of when it's important for parents to step in and be looking out for their kid. Well, and I think parents miss that.
Yeah. Well, you also live with your kid.
And Mike, you talked about it too. Like a lot of times, like a coach might not know this or a coach isn't this or like how many times have we talked about personalities already? Right. Yeah. And so why I'm saying that is because what I try and help with, Lee, and I'm not sure if you do too, but like that interpersonal skill set of like managing that, like to me, and if we did go back to my journey, like that's where I made a lot of errors, not necessarily with what type of hockey I was playing, but with managing the relationships around hockey. Did I have the right relationship with my coach? Was I fostering that? Did I understand what type of person he was and what made him tick? Like those are so important. And when you're a parent, you do want to approach a coach. What type of personality is he? How should he be approached? What's going to give you the most successful outcome with that? Like, I think that is something that is kind of forgotten too, is that you're managing human beings, right? And you need to be able to have some type of inner circle around you that wants to lift you up, not push you down. And if you're giving people reasons to push you down, it makes it a heck of a lot harder.
Yeah, Jason, we talked about this multiple times on these podcasts too, about buyer beware. Like if you're sitting in December saying, I can't believe this coach won't talk to my kid, and you knew going in that the coach didn't talk to kids and didn't talk to parents, like was a hey, see you at the banquet type of coach and don't talk to me. But if you knew that going in, don't be surprised when you don't get the reaction you want to get, during the season. So I think, and Christie says this in her book, in the podcast, and our articles. Do your research. Go into this as a parent and know the program you're going to join, and then manage your kid around that program. If you chose to go to a program that has, you said earlier, you had an old school, the guy was an old school, like, beat you down coach. If you want that and you and your son agree that this could be a good fit for you athletically and with the team, and then you just need to deal with it. You need to learn that, okay, this guy is a nutcase. But there's a part I like about that, and I need that. I don't want it necessarily, and certainly the game's changed from when you played and I played, and where kids are now, right? But we're all hopefully a lot more educated about how people work with each other. But if that's the coach you chose to go with in April tryouts, don't be shocked in December when that's your coach.
But Mike, here's the other thing. There's another half to that too. Is you got to know yourself as well. Right. It's not just the coach. You're 100% correct. You got to know how you are too, because, Jason, to your point, you handled that obviously beautifully with your son. I love that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I don't think parents realize you're not advocating for your kid. You just want to be heard. Right. And that can be dangerous if you go at a coach the wrong way. I mean, like the example I just gave about the positions, it was handled incorrectly. Right. It was, I want to be heard because I'm the parent and I know what's best for my kid. It's like, that's you got to be careful with that. You got to know what your kid wants. Jason, I wanted to ask you, actually, going back to that time you said around that 16, 17, when the adversity started to really hit you, did anyone stop and ask you what you wanted? Did anybody kind of try and meet you where you were at? Or was it a lot of different people telling you what should be happening?
Well, I mean, I guess my dad would have known and my mom would have known like that I wanted to stay. We had some, I would call them honest discussions. Maybe discussions is too neutral. They're usually a little bit more passionate, probably, if ever got to a discussion based thing. To Tim Speltz, who was an amazing GM, like he never really did, but I think that he was very progressive for the time. You know, he definitely took care of his players, and I think he had my best interest at heart. But I truly think, and I could be completely wrong on this, but like my dad being the alpha male that he was, A-type, and Brian Maxwell being almost the exact same personality, I think I got caught in the middle. Like, sure, there was stuff I'm sure that Brian Maxwell didn't like about my game, maybe even me from a personality standpoint, but I think it became a little bit of a, you know, I don't know how to put it properly, but, you know, like a little bit of a contest between him and my dad, right?
Yeah.
Like, I will do what I want to do when I want to do it. No one's going to tell me how to do it, and almost made it like a statement. And I think that really did hurt. As much as my dad was trying to help, I think it really, really ended up hurting me. You know, if he's upstairs in the concourse and he's telling every scout that Jason shouldn't be here and he shouldn't be playing with this guy, and why is he playing enough? You know, like that reflects poorly on me. That also gets back to the coach. You know, there's friction there. And yeah, I mean, the crazy thing is, like, we want it to be about hockey, but all that stuff, and for me personally, it was rarely the hockey that was really the issue. It was the stuff outside of the game that turned out to be the issue. And that's the thing that I'm maybe a little bit hypersensitive now too, and why I really coach the personal development side along with the hockey skills, because I think that is like the huge piece of the puzzle as far as advancement is concerned that is overlooked a lot of times.
You know, I want to pull the thread on that a little bit, bud. And let's talk to those dads and moms that are, we'll say alphas like you did, right? Because here's the deal. I know a lot of parents like that. And they love their kids. Like, there's no question how much they love their children, right? And I always start with that in my mind of like, this person loves their kid. That's why they're being like this, right? And I'm not necessarily saying what they're thinking is wrong. I'm not saying what they're saying is wrong, but I do want you to tap on the kind of how a parent, you have to be careful with this messaging. You got to be aware who's listening. You know, like I'm in a unique position right now where, you know, I'm kind of like I put myself in this kind of alternate head coach position on my son's team, where when the head coach can't be there, I take the reins for the middle of the bench. But a lot of times I'm sitting in the stands with the parents. Now, I will say that we're very blessed this year to have a really great group of people, but I hear everything. It's like I think sometimes you can forget. It's like, guys, I'm right here. Like, I'm sitting right here. Now, to their credit, it usually comes to me as a question, and we have a really great discussion. That's the other half of this and the benefit. But Jason, let's talk about parents. I'm going to phrase this as a question. What is your advice to the passionate parent who loves their kid and really believes in what they're saying and what they're trying to do? What is your advice to that person when their kid is maybe caught in the middle?
Well, I think you got to go one step outside of the problem and think about what you actually want, right? And what you want is a solution.
Right.
So how are you coming at it in a way that is going to get you a solution? And usually, like, aggression or finger pointing or telling, like, is that really going to help at the end of the day? And generally it makes things worse, right? Like, generally, like, how many times, I don't know, I mean, you can't put a percentage on that, but anytime someone is attacked in any way, whether you threaten someone physically or verbally, telling them that they're stupid, they're doing the wrong thing, like, that's not something that people usually give you a big hug about, right?
You didn't hear what I said. You're not listening.
Yeah, but
Right?
that usually works with officials, though, for sure.
That's right.
Right. So it's like, I think if you come at it from a solution-based mentality, right? Not an emotional, in the moment, I'm standing up for my kid, chest beating type way, right? Like, that is probably the first one that's going to give you a little bit of perspective on how to navigate it better,
right?
You know, and we're never going to nail it, right? I don't think, but like, at least if that is a bit of a perspective shift, that it's not protectionist mode and it's not, you know, fending off the demons mode. It's more like, hey, how do we work together to find a solution here? I think that they're probably going to make better choices in the moment.
Yeah, I'll also say, you know, we say this all the time. Great questions demand great answers, right? Poor questions are going to get you poor answers. Why is my kid not doing this? That's a poor question. You know, like I would, you know, if you have a question for me as a coach, maybe we're playing a system you don't fully understand and you think your kid needs to be more aggressive. I am absolutely okay with a kid or a parent asking me why is this the way that we're playing the game? Like, I just want to know. I want to learn. I'm more than happy to explain it to you. I really mean that. Like, that's me though, right? I know some coaches are not like that. I'm happy to explain the game to anybody who wants to learn the game, even if you know the game. I'll tell you my thought process. If you approach me the right way as a coach, if you come at me yelling, and Mike, you know this, it's like you're going to get a pretty quick answer. I'm going to walk away because you're not here for an answer. You're here to tell me what you think, right? So, Jason, this is tremendous perspective. I do want to keep going because we're about I guess halfway through your story, right? So,
right.
This is lovely how this is working, right? Like, you get drafted. I do want you to tell us because I love the way you described kind of going up, going down, the opportunities there. I want you to dive into that and tell the people about the NHL, AHL side of your journey here.
Yeah, it's kind of everything was on track, I guess, for lack of a better word. I ended up playing 4 years, I guess, of junior in Spokane. So I played my 19-year-old year. I was the last cut from Florida 2 years in a row. So as an 18-year-old and as a 19-year-old, was there into the season or right before the season started and got let go. So they felt that I was close. And then the 19-year-old years when I got to play for the World Juniors, what an amazing opportunity and geez, I'm so grateful, right, to be selected as one of the 12 best forwards in all of Canada and to win a gold medal in Boston. And, it was absolutely unbelievable. And, even from my podcast, talking to guys that played in the NHL and played 1,000 games, if they won a gold medal and hadn't won a Stanley Cup, that is seriously one of the highlights, right? If not the biggest highlight. So super grateful to have that experience. And then coming off the back end of that, I finished junior, like a bat out of hell. Had 21 goals in 18 games in the playoffs. So we got to one win away from getting to the Memorial Cup. Nobody's done that since. I just looked. Someone told me that the other day. Nobody scored more than 21 goals in the WHL playoffs since I did it. Finished off hot. Got up to Florida. Called up after we got knocked out. And that was the year Florida went to the finals. So they went to they played Colorado in the final. They ended up getting swept. But I was there for that whole thing. And I was actually supposed to play game one when I arrived. Ray Shepard was hurt. I was in the lineup. The team told me. I came to the rink 2 hours before a game, and all of a sudden Ray Shepard had some type of miraculous shoulder recovery during his pregame nap. So I wasn't in. And then from there I was this big splash, right? Come to the NHL, all the way to the finals, in and around the team, seeing all the excitement that was there. And then the next year, didn't start with the team. So now as a pro, for the listeners out there, you as a 19-year-old, you can't play in the minors. As a 19-year-old, either you're in the NHL or you're in junior. So super close that year. And then the next year didn't make it, but they started me in the AHL, and which was fine. I don't really remember being super disappointed with that, to be honest. They just finished that cup run, right? So they're in that part of their cycle too, where they felt that they had a team and they weren't necessarily, promoting youth in that scenario. But went to the AHL and had, I don't know, it was 20 goals or something in 45 games. I was over a point a game as a 20-year-old, which is not easy to do. Especially now with perspective. In the moment, you just do it. It's kind of fun to look back now and be like, holy crap, that was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, was doing well down there, scoring goals, being an impact offensive player. And then when I got called up, and they did call me up, they did it in a great way. They did it in a way of, hey, you're not going to play. There was communication there. You're not going to play a ton. You're going to be on the fourth line. We just want you to get comfortable with the league, get your feet wet. You know what I mean? Don't feel like there's pressure to produce. Wow. And, we're just going to bring you along, which was pretty ahead of its time, I think, at the time. But in saying that, I was playing, 7-8 minutes a game. I was with Chris. Not necessarily high offensive end players, and and my stats would reflect that. But it was fine because it was part of the process, right? It was part of my development process. I understood that they were going to bring me along, and I thought that I was going to retire a Florida Panther 15 years later, right? Is what I thought. And kind of the crazy part, and I don't know if I put that on the website or not, but I'd gone up and they'd sent me. Actually, I think they had called me up. So I'd scored my NHL goal at that time, which is now turns out to be my one NHL goal. Got to go to Pittsburgh. So I had just turned 21. My birthday was February 18th. I turned 21 that day, and we played the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh. Now, I already told you that Mario Lemieux was my idol
Yeah.
growing up. To be on the ice with him in Pittsburgh was mind-blowing. Like, it really was. I was still in that whole headspace of like, holy crap, like I am in the league, but I kind of don't feel like I'm supposed to be in the league. Like, these guys are here and I'm on the same ice as Mario. And anyways, had a good game that game, but it was like one of those things. It's just whether you play well or not, sometimes it's not really about the performance. And I got sent down like 3 days later. So this massive, huge high, I got sent down, and then I was in the AHL again for like a couple weeks, and I got the call. That was when I got the call. It was trade deadline day, and I got moved. And to tell you how naive and green I was, I didn't even know it was trade deadline day. Like, I don't know if it was the time or what, but got woken up from my nap in Greensboro, and yeah, got traded for Kirk Muller, 1-for-1. So like, kind of a typical deadline deal, right? Like, Florida thought they were going for it. Toronto wasn't in the playoffs. Bring in a veteran guy that's going to help for a top end prospect, and I went the other way. And that's one of the ways I start with talking about like how mindset is so important. And it's not about the hockey, because I got that phone call. I was asleep for a game in the AHL. In 3.5 hours, I had my stuff packed. I was gone from that place. Never saw those teammates again. Wow. And played the Philadelphia Flyers the next day in Toronto at Madison's at Maple Leaf Gardens
against the Legion of Doom, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, matched up against Lindros, Leclerc, and Renberg. Yeah. Like, talk about a crazy 24 hours at 21 years old, right, to go through, and then all the things you're managing in that environment as well. Once you even get there, the new dressing room full of new personalities, a new coach that you've never met before, a new division. I'd never played against those guys. I'd never been to a camp with any of them. I essentially knew nobody. And then to a spot like Toronto, who you're the guy coming in that you just got traded for their assistant captain, a beloved member. It was a big deal. And I'm not sure, like, I don't think I handled that poorly, to be honest. And even looking back, like, I do have some old VHS tapes that my dad just gave me like last year, actually, and I was able to watch. You kind of have this memory of what it was. I actually played pretty damn good, to be honest. Like, I played well. It was just one of those things that, well, I don't know where you want to cut in, but like the thing, there's so many dynamics when it comes to being a pro, right? Like, who likes you, who doesn't, what cycle is the team at? What type of impression did you make and when? And some of those things maybe didn't go great for me. Like Mike Johnston, you guys all know him, I'm sure. He's still on NHL Network, and he does a lot of work on broadcasting. Great guy too. He came in from Bowling Green right when I came there as well. So he was an undrafted guy, right? Undrafted guy, went to Bowling Green, got signed as a free agent. 2 years older than me, or maybe 1 year older than me. And we came in at the same time. And if you look at our stats from that year, like those 10, 12 games, we almost had like exact stats from that perspective. But then at the end of the year, I was the one that was told to go down to the AHL and play with St. John's Maple Leafs in the playoffs. And he didn't. So like, already there was like a little bit of a hierarchy there for some reason. And which made it my 4th pro team, you guys, as a first-year pro, right? Wow. Played with Florida, played with Carolina, played with St. John's, played with Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, that's a lot, to handle, and talk about different areas of the country too. And then the GM that traded for me got fired that summer. So that's not a good thing either in how the whole thing works. Neil Smith comes in. He's not trying to make Cliff Fletcher look like this hockey genius by any stretch of the imagination. He wants to put his own spin on it. I don't know how much that affected everything, to be honest, but it definitely affected something, because if you guys look at the numbers in the minors, like, they would be conducive to saying, hey, he probably should have had a pretty good chance to be a Maple Leaf, and it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah, just so you know, you can continue as much. This story is enthralling. This audience has heard me speak enough, so you can always continue as much as you need to on these.
Right. I guess maybe we can dive into, and you've talked about this a couple of times, mention it, Jason, the importance of mindset. And even from, the littles all the way up to the pros, it's so important to have the ability to structure that mindset, right? So what advice would you share we'll start with the athletes first, because they're going to face all kinds of ups and downs. And, your story is a great example on a larger level, all the way up to the pros, to when you were a little kid, of everything that you face. And mindset is so critical.
Yeah, I mean, I really do believe it is, without question. I think the biggest, if you're looking for a competitive actual advantage, like it is for sure, I think the number one thing, especially in this day and age when everyone has the physicals, tools, that they've more than they've ever had, right? So the skill level is very high. Everyone is doing the extra when it comes to that. How are you going to make a difference for yourself? Like what's going on in your head is definitely going to make a difference for yourself from a competitive aspect. The other aspect is though, how about from a game enjoyment aspect, right? Like that is the huge piece for me, is like being comfortable so you can be confident, so you can make an impact. So, to go back to my journey, like it was hard to be comfortable at 21 in a locker room with Curtis Joseph and Ty Domi and Matt Sundin and who I've never met before, right? And in an environment like that, to play your best. Like I do think I did a pretty good job of managing that, but having the skill set and like actually treating it like a skill, like how to be comfortable in these environments. Like what would I have done differently walking into that dressing room? What conversations would I have started? Who would I have sat next to? Who would I have asked to gone for lunch with? Right? Like those are all things that make the person more comfortable, which makes the hockey player better. Right? So to me, I call that mindset, because I think those are all choices in the moment that you have some control over how you're going to handle that. When it comes to the mindset of like managing pressure, managing the spotlight, how do you actually bring that to the ice so you can play well? Like there's so many things that are so beyond whether I could skate, shoot, stick handle, or hit. Like that happens in the 60 minutes, but there's so many things that happen prior to that 60 minutes that you need to be able to release, be in the ideal flow state and rock and roll. So yeah, mindset for me, there's a massive umbrella, Christie, when it comes to that. Most people think visualization or meditation or some tools. I think like the approach, like the approach to your career, the approach to your teammates, the approach to your practice habits. Those are all little choices that are mindset based. And yeah, I mean, I don't know where we want to go with that. Like one of the big things I wish I would have learned earlier was the idea of growth mindset,
right,
which has become more popular for sure in this day and age. But if somebody doesn't know what that means, like it's game changing.
Well, explain it. Let's talk about it.
Versus fixed mindset too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, it's about, one, like there's an innate belief kind of around fixed mindset. It's like these are like the talent mongers, like that really love the idea of talent, and that either you have it or you don't. Whereas a growth mindset is more like I can learn anything and skills are built.
Right.
Right. So that's sort of like the pretense of how it starts. And Lee, I know you're very well versed on this too. So by all means, jump in if you want to add anything. But yeah, like that idea in of itself, like I think that was one. Now knowing some of these belief systems, I believe are also downloadable. Right. So we're going to walk into an environment from, a young age. And I think this is where parents come into play too, is like, what type of belief systems are we downloading on our kids?
Right.
Sometimes we're doing it consciously. Sometimes we're doing it unconsciously. And I showed up at the party with this idea that I was good, right? Like my dad had told me how good I was. Like the results had shown how good I was. So there was this kind of this innate feeling, not conscious, that I was better. Right. And I mean that not necessarily in an arrogant way, but it showed up, I think, in like year 3, 4, 5, where I wasn't thinking in a growth mindset of how can I continue to get better, right? Like, where's the advantages for me to improve? Especially when you become a pro, it's kind of a weird mindset because like you are one of the best in the world, right? So it's almost like this scenario of like you feel like you've arrived. So when you feel like you've arrived, I mean, what are you doing? You're just sort of staying there, right? But I did notice that I kind of went like this, right? Just because my mindset wasn't in the right spot to continue to push that envelope. So I don't know if that's a good description of like I think growth versus fixed, but I mean, that's how it can show up for players. It's like, it'll really, I'll add to that too, because it can really help with the idea of mistakes. Like if mistakes are viewed from somebody with a fixed mindset as something that we really want to avoid, we don't want to look bad, right? We don't want to expose ourselves necessarily to others, right? As being inferior. This can be a really huge hamper on your performance, right? Because we're playing safe, we're protecting ourselves, we're avoiding challenges and competition where maybe we might get exposed. Whereas if we walk into that with a belief system that says, hey, I am going to find out something about myself in this moment that's going to help me get better. Right? Like that, there's a whole different framework now where we're more willing to lean into something that we might not get the result that we want, right? We might fail, we might have a mistake, but we're going to learn from that process. And inherently, that's what we believe is good for us. So like that perspective in and of itself is like a game changer, because you can choose to believe that.
Yeah. It's a real interesting thing when you get into the psyche of people, and when you get into people at different ages and different situations. Jason, one of the things that I love actually telling my team, and we'll keep it specific to hockey, is I say to the kids all the time, this whole game is based on capitalizing on other people's mistakes. So inherently, you are going to make mistakes in this game. And I tell them that, when we play afraid to make a mistake, we're going to make more mistakes, right? And you said it before. We'll talk about growth mindset. And I always love that scene in Mad Men when he goes, "Everything for you is an opportunity," right? Mm-hmm. And it's so true. Like that, to me, that's what growth mindset is. And you explained it so well, right? That every mistake you make is an opportunity to grow, right? And I tell the kids, I don't want you to make the same mistake 10 times. I want you to make it 3 times and learn. And I said, I will always be there to help teach you. I always use the metaphor too. I use it physically when I'm talking about scoring on a goalie. I say, are you looking at the goalie or are you looking at the net? And I always say, well, it's like when you go skiing, if you look at trees, you're going to hit a tree, right? You look at the path. And in hockey, if you're only looking at your mistakes, you're doomed, right? And again, the ability to see a mistake is a growth mindset. And again, this is why I think where people get hung up. I'm not saying you should make a mistake and be excited that you had made a mistake. It's the emotional side of it you got to put aside. You're going to feel bad about doing bad plays or making wrong plays. But this is where the growth mindset has to click in. Because if you dwell on the mistake and you dwell on the emotions, now you're in a fixed mindset. You're fixated on this situation, right? So I think that, for the parents listening, the coaches listening, definitely first off, look up growth mindset if this is a new term to you. It is a real game changer, Jason. You're not wrong. Like when people start hearing this, it really opens up perspective. But also look at these situations in the end. I can't stand it when a coach or a parent gets on their kid for a mistake, unless you're going to offer them some solution or opportunity on how to do it, right? I think that's so important. And then again, there's a whole team aspect to this as well. One more thing I wanted to tap on, Jason, too, and Mike, I know you got something too. It's just something I've noticed, right? I've been watching you the whole podcast. So for those of you listening, Jason, when you talked about being 13 and winning that provincial, you lit up. You just completely lit up. You looked like a kid again, right? You look like a kid all the time. Don't get me wrong. No, I'm just saying, you lit up. You lit up. And then when we started getting past, I think 17, you said several times, I recently watched that, and you know what? I did better than I thought. Right. So it sounds like when you were a young, let's say tween, early teen, you were living pretty present. You were in the moment. You were enjoying yourself. You had your friends. The game was there. It was a wonderful thing. Whereas then suddenly it was, we're looking back, right? We're reviewing from the future back, which is okay. I actually love the gratitude that you have. And I love the way you're able to look back and say, I did okay. But there's a clear shift there, right? Mm-hmm. From kind of a present moment mindset to I've got to survive mindset. Now, I guess there's 2 questions here. Is that what higher level hockey is like? And I think parents should know that. And B, with mindset in mind, can we stay present into that super advanced level of athletics?
Well, I think maybe I'll just take it from like where I take my coaching aspect from. And yeah. It's about encouraging and promoting the passion for the game. Sure. You have to love it, right? So if you don't love it and if you have high aspirations, you're not going to get there. Promise you, right? So at young ages, how can we foster that enthusiasm? How can we foster that passion? How do we foster promotion of excellence, right? And success so that you feel good about yourself. And I think that is, listening to you describe my story is great, because that is essentially what was happening. Like there was reason after reason after reason to fall more in love with the game. Right. And it wasn't all roses, but there was still it was still a thing to smile about.
Right.
once it got to be cynicism, jaded, victim mentality, I shouldn't be here, right? Like all those types of ideas, like that's where the fun drains, right? That's when it becomes a job. That's when it becomes a chore. And at any moment, like whether you're 15 or whether you're 25, when it's a chore and you're jaded and you're cynical, you're not going to probably be playing very good, right? So when I'm looking at that, like that's the connection that I try and get players to make all the time is, why are you doing it, right? And because, and that's the power of mindset. Again, what are you focused on? I mean, I was focused on being in the minors and feeling sorry for myself, even though I was playing well, right? I could have been focused on crushing the minors even more than I was, finding every
you were,
reason
by
to
the
get
way,
over
let's not you were killing it in the minors, okay? You're one of the
yeah,
best.
I mean, but maybe my energy wasn't awesome,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know. Like, I mean, I've actually tried to do a bit of a deep dive. It seems like when I talk to teammates, I don't get any, like, with real honest questions. Like, I guess I was a good teammate. Like, a lot of people remember me in a positive way, that I made them feel welcome and comfortable. But I don't think I gave that same energy to management. Like, I'm almost sure I didn't. Like, I was probably the guy that would be avoiding conversations and was a little offish and, handling it that way. And that probably didn't do me any favors at all. I think I was pretty team oriented. I believe that I was always team first and wanted to be respected by the fellas. And then it was an us versus them mentality for me. So again, notice I use mentality. Like that's a total choice. I didn't recognize it as a choice in the moment though, right? In the moment, I was just on autopilot and operating the best I did that I knew how. No one had taught me about, interpersonal relations, or, I mean, how is this behavior, my actions, helping or supporting or discouraging my goals? Right. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think to your point, right. A person who is in control of your destiny, you don't have control of that, right? The management team does. If they feel like, oh, Jason's a good player, he's popping pucks in the net, he's great, but he's just not, it just doesn't seem like he's not even advocating for us to want to move him on. Like, it's almost like that, but maybe not even consciously, knowing that's happening, right? You're like, listen, I'm just focused on my teammates, focused on getting better. But, it's all about, I look at it like from a body language perspective too. It's always about, like, how are you conducting yourself? Are you a happy person? Are you grateful to be here? Are you fighting to get out of here? Are you content on where you're at? Like, all those kind of things. And you just talked about that growth mindset and wishing you knew that then. Like, imagine if you had right, when you were 20 years old, 22 years old, saying, hey, Jason, this is how you could control your life right now. Like, these are things. So, I mean, I guess my question would be, for all of us lay people, what are some activities athletes can do to improve their mindset? Because most players will say, I'm working hard, I'm trying my best, I'm doing what the coach is telling me to do. But, I think I even just saw an article on Tom Brady talking about, his transition from playing to, being in the booth, and how he loves the mistakes he's making. Like, he embraces the mistakes he's making. And he knows it. He's like, listen, I ain't good at this, but I'm not supposed to be. Like, I'm taking this and I'm going to use this to my advantage, because I don't mind making a mistake, where maybe some of our athletes, a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, makes a mistake and it's devastating. They don't know how to get out of it, and they have nobody around them coaching them to get out of it. So what are some strategies that maybe you can give to the players on, how do you create and that, not to give away your business and not to not have anybody go to the website and sign up, right?
I mean, let's promote it real quick. Like, so it's upmyhockey.com.
I just looking at, just the whole piece of it is so valuable.
Yeah, Jason, I want to make sure we say that real quick. It's upmyhockey.com. You have a podcast there. You've got a tremendous amount of resources. Jason's podcast, my friends, he's had some incredible names and guests on his show as well. So make sure that you check that out after this episode. Jason, answer the question. I would have felt remiss if we didn't start.
And also, Jason, just to dovetail on that, and how parents can help support their athlete as they work through this.
Yeah, I mean, I try and talk to those players, right, in a stretch of like what we're talking about, like not just celebrating everything that they've done, but usually it's the opposite of like, hey, what went poorly, or what was your biggest piece, and how did you move forward from that? So it's definitely aimed at probably your target audience here too, like, young players trying to get there, and parents trying to do the best that they can. But Mike, and I don't mean to be this like answering this in a way that is self-promotional, but like that's the $1 million question. I thought was like, okay, how do we like, and players or parents will come up to me, well, how do you work on mindset? Like, what is that?
Well, that's what I'm asking. I mean, that's not even self-promotional. It's like, who do you go for? I mean, we went to the person who does this, right? So how do you get out of that, like that stuck, like, oh my God, this is just who I am. And I the coach doesn't believe in me and my teammates don't believe in me. And I think I'm working hard, but I don't know. Like how do I get myself to believe that just because everybody else is telling me I'm not able to play at this level, that I should be able to play at this level because I want to play at this level.
Right. Well, yeah. So to your point, I was like, when I started getting into this and you mentioned like, what would I have been like if I had an older version of me to help. Right. And I heard something somewhere the other day, just saying like at your, your darkest or whatever your biggest turmoil is in life, when you come out of that, you've now learned how to help the person that was in that. Yeah. Right. And so like, I do feel that I'm kind of holding my highest purpose right now. Like I've been in that trench. I've seen it from a perspective and now graduated from that. And I feel like I am kind of in a position to be able to help, and in doing that, I was like, okay, well, how do we help these players? I mean, what do we do? And I took it from a quite frankly, like a personal development approach. So I'm speaking using hockey language, talking about personal development skills. And like week 1 of my program is called Mental Agility. It's based on mental fitness. Like I believe that mental fitness and mental health are 2 different things fundamentally.
100%.
I think that if we have strong mental fitness skills, the mental health doesn't even come into the picture because we're equipped with tools that can support our growth and our development. And we don't get to these far end stages, right, where kids really, really need help. So that's who I'm speaking to with my stuff. It's like I'm teaching mental fitness through mental fitness. Like mental agility is a term that I use. Like how quick can we get from these emotions that hold us back from playing our best to playing our best? So I speak that language of like, you have a goal and you want to play your best hockey. In these moments, there's going to be decisions that you are able to make with some new perspectives, right, on how to handle them, which is going to now allow you to play better hockey more consistently, which is what all players want to do no matter how old they are. So I don't know if that's helpful. Like a lot of people will say, let's even say there's a concept that I teach called the 3 R's, I call it. So it's a process to help with mistakes. It's called rewind, replay, reset. So you rewind the mistake mentally in your mind, you replay it without the mistake in it, and then you reset and you get back to the moment. It's a really quick process. It can totally help, and it does help a ton of players, right? So I get more into it in my program, but I don't believe like that's a Band-Aid in and of itself, because you still are having a big problem with the mistake if you're somebody that dwells on the mistake. So, okay, let's have a tool to deal with it, but let's reframe the wiring around your mistake, right? So I'm teaching on the front end, I'm teaching emotional awareness, like what emotions support your performance, what emotions don't. Where do you fit in that picture of that? And also, what story are you telling yourself about some of these things? So lots of times it's amazing, Mike, when a player is presented with a new way to think about what they've previously thought about that actually supports their performance and their goals. It doesn't take much for them to click into that and being like, yeah, this is way better. This is way easier to play when I think these things. And then you also give them on the other side of it some tool, right, to help them with the mistake in the process. Now it becomes more of a seamless kind of journey through it. So what I did is I created a 4-week program that's online. It's video based. It builds on each other. It is personal development combined with hockey acumen, allowing kids to really conquer their goals and dreams, I think, in a really holistic way. So I mean, I don't know if I perfected it, but it's definitely seemed like it's had some great success, and I'm happy that I was able to do that on my wife's suggestion. So I'll throw that out there for Sarah.
I knew there was a woman behind that. Jason, it's easy to rewind and replay. How do we all get better at resetting?
Good question, Christie.
Well, what I think, it's easier to reset when we know what the lesson was, which I think is the biggest thing, right? A lot of times that mistake will happen and we're fixated, to use Lee's term, on it, right? So we're so emotionally involved and connected to that mistake. and the failure of it and what
Yeah.
people think of us, what our teammates think of us, how does that make us look, that it just sits there, right? And a lot of us have a hard time from being able to leave that and move on. So that replay aspect, it forces the athlete to see where the error was, which is a growth mindset inherent product, right? Like if we get good at that, we automatically go back and we see, okay, I didn't shoulder check going back for that puck on that retrieval, which is why I didn't see that player in the middle of the ice when I tried to go cross ice for the exit, right? So now they replay that, seeing the shoulder check, seeing the player where it was. Now they wind the net, they're on a wheel and they skate the puck out of the zone. They feel good about themselves because they found the solution to their problem. Right. They've learned from that mistake, which allows them now to reset because there's nothing to focus on. The lesson's been taught.
We got to say it. This is not just limited to hockey. You can do that anywhere. and Jason, to your point, and I love that you say mental fitness because I say the same thing, right? It's about getting in reps. It's about putting in the workout in your mind. To use the point you made, right, about mental health versus mental fitness. If you stay physically fit, your physical health typically, not all the time, stays pretty good, right? But you've got to do the workouts. You've got to do the gym. You've got to do the physical fitness stuff. Your mind works the same way. And I think that the biggest thing that people in our line of work are trying to break is that you've got to continually do it. It's not a pizza dinner with the team. That's a great time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it. But that is not mental fitness, right? That's a pizza dinner with the team. And finding those reps for each person is always, and this is why I love that you didn't say, well, here's the answer. Every single human being has a different process with this. And I think the art that you've discovered, and you said this, is that you've got to take the time with each person to kind of figure out where they're at along this process, find the right puzzle piece for that moment, right? The same thing. I do it from a team standpoint, right? I work with teams as a whole. And I'll tell you what, to everybody listening, when you get 12, 15, 20 people in a room working on their mental fitness together, what do you think that does, right? Now everyone's involved. Everyone's buying in. You've got a community of people trying to do it. That really changes the perspective, right? Because while the stigma surrounding this stuff is bending big time, like in recent years, it's so much better than it was just even 10 years ago. It's still not broken, right? And I was just having a great conversation the other day about, how we say, or we stigmatized it when we used to say, hey, you need help, buddy. Hey, buddy, you need help. That person probably really does need help, but you've just said it in a way to them that's embarrassing, right? So I love that you brought up mental fitness, man. And I love that you're on that journey because those conversations, those communities, that's where the solutions lie. Like, I wish it was something like, well, I need a bigger bicep. Well, do bicep curls. Well, the truth is this, there's like 7 different ways to build a bigger bicep, and we don't know how your bicep looks. I'm just using that as a metaphor, obviously. But mental fitness, man, that's beautiful that you brought that up.
I didn't like that. I mean, and again, from a player perspective, like mental health, sports psychology was just kind of coming into the mainstream, I guess, and maybe not even mainstream. Like NHL teams would have it, but it would be somebody, and taking nothing away from sports psychologists. But the guys in my era were gray-haired guys that never played sports ever and learned it all through books, right? So like the connection factor wasn't necessarily there, right? Like the approachability factor wasn't really there. And for someone like me, like the respect factor, quite honestly, wasn't quite there, Right. And also you had to like raise your hand to your point and be like, I think there's something wrong with me, which is the last thing you want an NHL player to ever feel like they have to admit to. Right. Because especially in that era, like we were warriors, right? Like everything about us was supposed to be impenetrable, right? So for you to say like, hey, I need some support, like totally wrong. Like the way the system was wrong.
It would not have helped.
Yeah, it doesn't help, right? So I don't say there's anything wrong with anyone. I mean, if there's some issue that you have with a mistake or lower comms, there's nothing wrong with you. You're a human be. Like, do you want to be your best? Like when that's the starting point of the conversation, don't come at this like there has to be something ridiculously broken. Come at it from the growth mindset of how do I become the best player I can be? And that is a way more inviting environment to be in my opinion, as an athlete, right? Like, oh, here's this idea that might actually help me 10, 15, 20%. Holy, I should probably explore this. Right.
Well, and at the NHL level, if it's 0.5%,
right,
you want
what
that.
a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like well, Jesus, this isn't a commercial, but this is what I get excited about. Like when somebody can take week 1 of the program of mental agility, and a parent will call me and say that there's other parents in the stands that are approaching them about what happened to little Jimmy.
Yeah.
Like, you know how crazy that is?
Yeah.
Same skating, same skill, same stick handling, same everything. But it changed up top for them. And they're now playing to a greater piece of their potential. Like, how exciting is that?
Yeah.
You know, like it's crazy how exciting that is. And it's no magic. It's just exposure. And you said about like individuals, I 1000% agree. So what I'm presenting is information and ideas. And I tell them that they are building their personal operating manual. So Mike, you were talking earlier about, you know, like, what would you do or how do you help? Like, I want kids to help themselves at the end of the day. Like, I don't want to be the one that has to guide them all over the place. I want them to know them. And the better they know them, the better their self-awareness is, the better they pick up the tools. They write their own personal operating manual. They know how they're supposed to prepare. Right. They know what they need to do between games. They know how they should recover after a shift. They know what thoughts they need to think to create the emotions that they want to play their best, right? Like, that's the exciting stuff. But that's when you talk about self-esteem, self-worth, mental fitness. I am in control. I am empowered in this scenario where I didn't feel like I had power before. That's a big difference.
100%, man. And look, we're out of time here for our audience, but I gotta say this, Jason, that I think the most powerful people, not just teachers, but the most powerful people are the ones that can look at their own upbringing and say, you know, I needed to soothe 17-year-old me, and I'm going to teach other people this because I don't want them to feel like I felt. And you can apply that to a lot of different teachers and mentors and trailblazers in the world. But to me, that's the most powerful. You know what I mean? And it's clear that what drives you, a lot of things, I'm sure, but it's that, okay, I don't want anybody to feel the way that I felt, and I'm going to share this to try and help as many people as possible. And you deserve to be commended for that. I love how humble you are with Up My Hockey, but the truth is this: it's something everyone should be seeing and listening to and finding, because this is the path forward. So for all the parents listening, all the coaches listening, if you haven't made a serious, I'll just say, look into this side of upbringing. It's not even hockey, right? Like the mental side of things. It behooves you to do it now. All right. We can teach anybody to take a wrist shot or a snapshot, all right, over time. You'll work on that. But if you're not working on the mind and the self-esteem and everything you just said about kids advocating for themselves, find their own manual. I love the way you said that. We're doing them a disservice, right? That's got to be part of the process here. Christie, Mike, anything before I close this up?
Just kudos to you, Jason, because the timing is just so right now. And working on the mental agility beyond the hockey rinks, something that these kids is going to be so valuable, not just in their game, but in the game of life, throughout their lives. If they can develop that mental agility now and apply it in hockey, it's going to reap many rewards throughout their lifetime.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think this stuff is awesome. And I think it's just one of those things where even if you just wanted to get a taste of, you know, what you're talking about and go to your site and just kind of and listen to your podcast and listen to what other people are experiencing, you know, it might not be for every player, and you might not need, you know, how much in-depth help do you need or support or coaxing or whatever it is. I think the best thing is just explore these opportunities that we have, you know, that none of us had right before, because we didn't have podcasts and web access and, you know, all, you know, you just kind of dealt with it and you said, oh, shit, you know, I hope I have somebody in my life that, you know, can step in and help me here. And now you have an opportunity to kind of explore a whole bunch of different people in your life that can help you. And I think it's great for our kids because it is getting worse as far as how they feel and what their self-esteem is and how they view themselves, because they're viewing hundreds of thousands of other kids. You know, you didn't need to, you know, you only knew the kids in your town. You know, now these kids know everybody in the world. And I think, you know, so we might as well just take everybody in the world and use them to help us as well.
Yeah. Lee, if I can maybe finish, and I don't even know how eloquent I'm going to be with this, but like for me and for my journey, Christie, you touched on it. the starting point for me is hockey, really, because hockey has given me almost everything, and I am so respectful and so grateful to the sport that I want it to be the best, safest, most empowering place it should be, right? So like I want to make the game better, ideally, like from a philosophical standpoint. Now as a father and seeing life as a whole and not just a player chasing a dream, I see the value, the inherent value of being involved in a team sport like hockey that can be a personal growth mechanism for our players, right? So that is like the next layer for me. How do we make hockey great? How do we make the players within the game more empowered, better people, more able to manage, right? And then I get to talk to the players. So the next layer on that is, how do you be your best? How do you make your dreams come true, right? And if you can have people have success and be a piece for them on their road to their dreams, like that's a real cool thing. And if they don't get there, they did a much better job of trying in a more productive way. And if they don't, they're set up, right? They've learned a ton of things from the game and from the sport, from the experience that they're going to use wherever it is that they go. So I guess when my head hits the pillow at night, it's like, are all these kids going to make the NHL? No, of course not. But that's not the point. The point is they're feeling good about themselves on their journey. They're taking ownership of their own ride. They're learning all these valuable lessons. Some of them will get to where they want to go. And for those that don't, I guarantee you they're going to be better contributors into whatever aspect that they want to do. So that's kind of like the holistic idea of what it is that I get excited about. And it's just fun to see the results in the process.
That was pretty eloquent, bud. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty eloquent. I'll let you have the final word there. Well, we're out of time, Jason. Fantastic hour and a half with you here, man. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you guys having me on. Love the discussion. You can shoot the crap about hockey anytime.
Yeah, man. Well, we'll have you back on another time. But that's going to do it for this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Again, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, you want to ask Jason something, you can text us using the link that accompanies this episode in the show notes. Or you can old school it, which is old school now. Email team@ourkidsplayhockey.com. Anytime you want, we're here for you guys. You are the best audience in the world, and we can't thank you enough. Thanks for listening to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. We hope you enjoyed this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Make sure to like and subscribe right now if you found value wherever you're listening, whether it's a podcast network, a social media network, or our website, ourkidsplayhockey.com. Also, make sure to check out our children's book, When Hockey Stops, at whenhockeystops.com. It's a book that helps children deal with adversity in the game and in life. We're very proud of it. But thanks so much for listening to this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey, and we'll see you on the next episode.